There's a storm brewing at Wrexham Football Club, but what's it all about? So here's a basic rundown of the facts. Well, the roots of the problem go back to the last decade. Wrexham was owned by Price Griffiths, who was a lifelong Wrexham supporter, seen as Mr. Wrexham, and, well, he was expected to only do what was best for the club. But he sold out to two property developers, Mark Guterman and Alex Hamilton, who looked to maximise the racecourse site, and their plans caused massive concern to supporters. Now, it was a rocky, difficult time which ended when the Wrexham supporters were able to gain control of the club by putting it into administration after Hamilton had rather recklessly and angrily resigned. As a result, the club was put into administration, set it onto a downward spiral on the pitch, which led to its relegation to League Two. But after a court case, the club was taken from Hamilton and Guterman and bought out by a consortium led by local businessmen Nev Dickens and Jeff Moss. Well, at first, things seemed to be rather promising. Moss enjoyed being seen as the knight in shining armour, and off the pitch there was hope that there was a new regime. Although it soon became apparent that Supporters Trust weren't going to become part of that, despite their hard work in repelling Hamilton and Guterman. And also, on the pitch, things started to go badly as Wrexham collapsed out of the Football League for the first time in its 130-year history. Dickens left the consortium, but concerns now are starting to build on the actual intentions of what was going to be done to the ground itself. It's located on the edge of the town in a pretty decent, lucrative area. There's lots of retail outlets and retail parks around it, and there was some concern as what to happen. Ian Roberts was brought in onto the board of Wrexham Village. He's a property developer alongside Moss and the chief executive Paul Rattou, and that suddenly talk began to turn to rather ambitious ideas for its development, including Rattou's pet project, the Staddy Arena, the idea that the Kop stand would be demolished and replaced with a stand which could be converted through a flick of a button into an indoor arena. It's all pretty highfalutin and spectacular stuff, and plenty of fans feel pretty comfortable about it at the time. But major changes were afoot. The rugby league club Wrexham Crusaders were brought in to share the racecourse ground, a move which raised many eyebrows. Essentially, the two clubs were merged under the umbrella of a holding company called Wrexham Village. As a result, Wrexham, although they owned their ground, were allowing the rugby league team to play on it rent-free. The argument behind that was that it was mutually beneficial for all parties, that the increased money brought in by the rugby league team, particularly Sky monies, would benefit the football club. However, despite being repeatedly asked the question, Wrexham Village were very reluctant to offer any detail on just how that money would be split up. And certainly Wrexham's concerns that they were minor parties or even helping out the rugby league team became exacerbated when in late 2010 the rugby league team was put into administration. By this point, supporters' concerns really were becoming grave. By now, some student flats had been built for the Glyndŵr University, a neighbouring building, and it had gone up, already the first block had gone up right next to the club, taking up part of the car park. This land, despite the fact that it has been suggested it was for the benefit of the football club and beneficial for it, was on land which had now been ceded to Wrexham Village. The amount of money that they put into the football club to cover its debts being clawed back. The Wrexham Village owners arguing that it was a loan, and so in lieu of that loan being repaid, they were allowed to take the parcel of land on which the flats were built. A controversial move, to say the least, but especially when it was discovered that a mortgage taken out to protect the development was taken out against a racecourse ground, and furthermore that a mortgage against a loan to ensure that the Crusaders could continue to play in the Super League and come out of administration was also taken against the racecourse. In essence, the football club with its ground was taking the risk against the development and against the rugby league club's downfall. If either of those things failed, then Wrexham Football Club would lose its ground, which it had played on since 1872. Phase 2 of the development continues, although Moss has now claimed that he's going to sell up the club, citing abuse taken from the fans as the reason, which is something the fans strenuously belie, arguing that he hasn't actually reported any abuse to the police. A series of tirades against the fans on the owner's behalf on the club's website certainly haven't helped matters at all. Neither have been the identity of the putative bidders for the club. Rob Bickerton, a football administrator, along with two others with backgrounds in the lower leagues, are brought in supposedly to facilitate the changeover of ownership and bring in new investors. At first they seemed to be heading their own bid, which collapsed. People were suspicious about whether that actually was the case. Certainly a faltering performance by Bickerton on a non-league show on BBC London didn't help the cause. He talked about buying the ground, the club then saving up for the ground, which seemed a difficult act to pull off if he didn't actually own the ground as collateral. It was hard to see just how he would pull money in. Also, he was asked about the involvement of Stephen Vaughan, the highly controversial previous owner of Chester City, amongst others. Barrow, Chester and the Rugby League club have all been owned by him and have all suffered the consequences. Just have a look up on the internet if you're not aware of those. Wrexham fans were mortified at the thought, and Bickerton's categorical denial of Vaughan being involved in the running of the club was rather too deliberate to be got away with. Fans immediately leapt on the fact that as Vaughan is at the moment under an 11-year ban from being a director of a football club or any business, he couldn't legally be involved in the day-to-day running. Bickerton hadn't denied he was involved in the investment. Well, eventually, Bickerton's consortium, their bid fell through, and Vaughan confirmed to the Evening Leader that he was actually involved in the bid. However, there was still more bids in the pot. Steve Cleeve, another highly controversial businessman, appeared next to Jeff Moss and Ian Roberts when Wrexham played Crawley in February 2011, and confirmed to the leader that he was also a bidder. A massive concern was shown by Wrexham over his credentials as well. Supporters are also highly concerned at the fate of the club shop. Barely a couple of years old, but now very short on stock, and certainly by the look of the shop displays, looking to be more of a Crusaders shop than a Wrexham one. Wrexham fans argued that the club's poor state, Moss, as confirmed by Dean Saunders, would constantly complain as he was putting money into the club to fund the wage bill. It was down to the fact that how could a club work commercially when its stock was completely denuded in the club shop? Things came to a head on Saturday the 19th of February when Wrexham faced Gateshead in a conference match. Huge demonstrations took place during the match as the fans expressed their horror of any possibility of Vaughan being involved with the club, and indeed their mistrust of Roberts and Moss in general. They hope for support from the Welsh Assembly government, from the local council. Certainly the supporters trust have contacted them on a regular basis, but at the moment all the cards are in Jeff Moss's hands. It all seems a sad fate for a football club with such a remarkable history and which had fought so hard to rescue itself, and a sad ending to Moss's tenure, no matter how it works out, because Moss, one suspects, when he came in, might well have looked to do the best for the club but also get something from it, from his investment. But as time has gone on, he seems to have developed more and more of a siege mentality. He seems to have locked out the fans from his thinking. And as his anger against the fans is stoked more and more, his self-righteous desire to do what suits him seems to be increasing. Well, stop press. Little did I know as I was recording at the racecourse that things were moving fast behind the scenes. Rob Bickerton and his two colleagues, who had been brought in only a couple of weeks earlier by Moss and Roberts, had resigned as the triumvirate running the club on a day-to-day basis and withdrew their bid. They cited as their reason the supporters' strength of feeling, although they did say that their new bid didn't involve Stephen Vaughan. Also then, Moss and Roberts came out not to criticise the protesters, but to say that they were keen to sell to a fan-based consortium, and local businesswoman, well-regarded businesswoman Stephanie Booth, announced something which supporters had hoped to hear for a while, that she was interested, alongside the council and the supporters group, and maybe putting something together. So, sounds like a happy ending, doesn't it? It sounds like the fan power had won out. A note of caution, though. As we've said all along, Jeff Moss has said he's pushing lots of money into the club. And there's always a danger, isn't there? He did say in his statement that a deal had to be done quickly. There's a real possibility, if Wrexham can't put funding in place, that Moss's message is a coded one, that possibly he's going to withdraw funding from the club and, as a result, allow losses to accrue and the club slide into administration, and then the work which Dean Saunders and his squad, the terrific work they put in to put the side into a strong playoff place, would all be wasted. Wrexham fans will hope that the a consortium between the Supporters Trust, the Council and Booth. Well, I say consortium, it doesn't really exist yet, but one can be created between the three interested parties and strike while the iron is hot, in which case there could be a happy ending after all, but this story still has plenty to run.